you're a, if you're a chemical company, you want to hire someone, a graduate from college. What do you think that graduate should know?
Should know chemistry.
Right? And you would expect him to know chemistry 1, chemistry 2. If there's a chemistry 3, then know chemistry 3.
Yeah.
And then you should know all those other specialty chemistries. I think like your experience is the same as my experience. Just because you took chemistry 1 doesn't mean you remember chemistry 1. Just because you took chemistry 2 doesn't mean you remember chemistry 2. Really, the most you remember is the last chemistry you studied.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're supposed to review everything, but the current school system doesn't facilitate that. Instead, they compartmentalize all your subjects, and then that promotes the extinction of those ideas in from your memory.
I'll be the first to admit that I'm, not a scientist. I try to use science in day-to-day life the best that I can, the best I know how, but I don't have a master's degree and not a PhD. Mm-hmm. I haven't. But what I did have to do as I navigated my way through school, and fortunately at McKendree University, we had a lot of like Socratic seminar type mm-hmm. classes where we just met and discussed, right? So I got decent at discussing, networking, understanding what I needed to do to convey my narrative, even though I may not have had every single piece to the story. I may not have had retention of the entire article or articles that I read, but I could still come up with a narrative or an argument that made sense to mm-hmm. the class and people understood it. That is why I'm successful now in my career in a way, mm-hmm. right? Networking, talking with people, being able to relate to people, right? Being willing to listen, things like that. Am I the best scientist? Can I regurgitate information? Hell no. Mm-hmm. But I can definitely relate to people. When you can combine the two, though, like if I had my PhD, right? If I was the best exercise scientist, and I could relate, have discussions, create those connections, then that's the cream of the crop. That's the top of the field, right? There are examples of that, best practices out there, leaders, authorities that we can learn from. I think if we're going to reform education, we talk to them. Ken Robinson seems like one of those people. Maybe he's already doing it, right?
Yeah, I've watched his video. I've listened to several other education reformers. I generally disagree with all of them about the changes they want. So mm-hmm. I acknowledge that change is needed, but their solutions seem impractical or like unnecessary to me. They stray from the root problem, which is the quantification of education, and that's actually one of the essential problems that my product Minerva is supposed to address. Because consider that if you can quantify knowledge, then you can create a schedule for the progression a student follows, and it's one that is mathematically predictable. So a person begins his math journey learning arithmetics, and we can say that it takes so long to learn each of these courses, but in addition, we can ensure that he retains all that knowledge, that his knowledge of arithmetics as he graduates from that subject to the next subject. He still retains that as he graduates to the next subject, and then so on and so forth. It tracks the person's knowledge, and it's able to notify him throughout his entire educational life, when he has to review something, when he has to like how efficient he was during a given study session. The reason why I consider memorizing information to be important is because first, it allows you to recall that information in situations when you cannot rely upon your phone. So if you are conducting a surgery, you cannot use your phone at that time. You need to know the procedure, and you need to know it by heart. So that is one scenario where you have to memorize. The other scenario, or the other reason why it's good to memorize information, is because your mind is like a pressure cooker. When you absorb or when you retain this information, the idea marinates in your head and it cooks. And so long as you're able to think about it, your understanding and your perception of the information grow. So if I plant an idea in your head today, a week from now, so long as you're still feeding the idea, and it will transform, and then a month from now it will become even better, more complicated, and then a year from now even more nuanced. And that's why memory is important. So long as you can recall it and you're thinking about it, it's there and it's growing. But if you cannot think about it and you cannot recall it, it's frozen in time.
You bring up great points, and it makes me think of the next gentleman that I was looking at earlier today, Adam Grant. He's written many books. One of them is called Originals. He talks about precrastinators versus procrastinators, and he tried to search for like an optimal amount of procrastination that might lead to more creativity. And he found that, like one would assume, that if you procrastinate too long, obviously you're going to fail. But if you precrastinate and you're thinking about the activity or the objective or the deadline months in advance, you have so much anxiety about it, or there's so much unneeded stress, that it actually limits your creativity. So there seems to be like an optimal threshold of, okay, the stressor's approaching, I have the information over here, and it's kind of subconsciously working in my mind, and I might have an idea Monday that's different than Wednesday, and then on Friday it all comes together. I sit down Saturday and write my project. That seems to be organic, and it seems to require the individual to understand that for themselves, and probably a lot of failing and a lot of overcoming obstacles.
To me, that sounds like illusory correlations, not an actual procedure. If I were to approach a problem, I would not choose when. I would not say I should begin now or I should begin later. I would go through all the steps, starting from the beginning, which is the most appropriate place. So I would try to do as much as I can every single day. I don't try to schedule or set a goal for how much I need to accomplish. The expectation is merely that I do my best. And as long as I follow a correct logical formula, because there's always a design process, the final product should be the best I could have possibly created. But I'm never thinking to myself, I have to do so much by this date, and I have to do so much by that date, and then I have to do so much by this date. Or, oh, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, now I have to do this. The mindset is always, what is the most I can do right now? And then I let myself sleep on it, and when I wake the next morning, I'm refreshed and I can think about the problem again with new eyes.
I like that style, and I like that approach. If you force somebody to do that, or you tried to force that viewpoint upon somebody, do you think it would stifle their creativity?
Mine or his? Because
Not just an individual who maybe isn't as articulate, or somebody who isn't as detail-oriented.
Well, my viewpoint is simply that a person should try his best every single day. Like, that's it. It's
Always
not
your best. Yeah.
Just try your best. Like, you don't have to create a schedule and say I have to meet this quota. You don't have to say, oh, I need to. Like you don't need to give up either and say like I'm not ready to do this yet. I have to wait until there's an existential threat. Like no, just do your best. Put your best effort and see what happens. And don't be afraid to fail.
Vulnerability. Right?
I think so.
There's power in vulnerability, right? Would you agree? Being able to say, and like this podcast is an example, and I think we'll create a better episode this time than last time, and we'll continue to work towards that. And like at the beginning, I was really nervous. So I had to breathe a little bit. We had to stop, do another take. I was nervous last time. I'm gonna be nervous next time. I'm going to fear certain things, but we're still gonna put it out, and we're still gonna come up with ideas that are valuable. And I think people appreciate that. And there's a lot to be said for that, and not only on the internet and some of these creative spaces that we were discussing today, but in the bare bones of the educational system. Let's be vulnerable. You know what I mean? Let's learn from our past mistakes, and let's find some obstacles to attack.
I prefer the word honesty. Like,
honesty.
You should be honest. I don't actually know what vulnerable means, but if you're honest, then you assess the situation correctly and objectively. You don't hide. You don't try to disguise the truth. If we say that every action causes a reaction, which is the premise or the cornerstone of logic, if you won't even acknowledge the reaction, how can you possibly determine the correct action or how you're supposed to change your actions? You need to say, like, you need to acknowledge that you suck, because if you suck, then you have a reason to change your action. But if you are constantly saying to yourself, I'm awesome, why do anything different? Doing anything different doesn't make sense. So you have to be correctly perceiving reality. That's the only way you will have a legitimate cause to improve yourself.
There's an optimal threshold in that then too, right? Like we need self-esteem, right? But at the same time, a validation of the things that we aren't getting done, or the validation of the things that we shouldn't be doing, or things we should be doing, is necessary. And it might feel bad. You might feel shame. You might feel less worthy. And if you get stuck in that space and you don't do anything about it, it's terrible for you and it's terrible for society. And we don't want people stuck in that space. But a little bit of self-loathing, if you will, a little bit of, man, I didn't do that well enough, or I could have done this when I should have done that, is healthy. It is necessary, right? In addition to the validation of, all right, man, you didn't make a very good decision, but we're here to support you so that next time you can.
I disagree with that characterization or framework.
Okay.
Because I almost never refer to anything that I've done as bad. I simply acknowledge the possibility of doing it better.
So reframing as opposed to just saying, no, this was bad.
My self-esteem is never harmed because it's a given that my work has flaws, but there's aspects of beauty to it as well, and I appreciate the good things I've done, and then I look at the other things, and I tell myself I can do better, and that's it.
That's as simple as that.
That's it.
I can do better.
I can do better.
It's not. Oh man, what was me? I did this thing when I shouldn't have done that. It's not even I can do better. It's how can I do better? Because it's like I've already assumed that I can do better. Mm-hmm. What you're supposed to be asking is how can I do it better? Mm-hmm. So I don't. When I look at other people, I don't think that they suck. Like I don't say, oh, this person's bad, this person's terrible. I don't have any of those negative judgments. I simply look at their actions and I see like, what are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? And then if they're doing something wrong, what can they do to correct that? Mm-hmm.
And when I look at myself, it's the same thing. Or I have the same, I perform the same assessment. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? The things that I'm doing wrong, how can I correct them? And there's never any instance of self-loathing or any time when I try to put myself down or anyone else down.
Where do you think that came from? Parents teach you that?
No, that's
innate in you.
No, it's not innate. It's the correct interpretation of the statement that an action causes a reaction. So if you're doing something wrong, it's not because of you. It's because you did something wrong.
You had this. When did you become conscious of your decisions?
Around 17. It was a very distinct moment in my life. But that's for a different.
I guess what I'm trying to say is there's got to be a set of values that create.
Yes, and
right and wrong.
I can tell you that, but it's for another podcast.
All right.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And it would be when we talk about religion. So.
There we go.